All right, this week we are not going to get as far as I thought when I first turned the camera on the other day, but we're going to get some rafter trim on, some rafter roof braces on, just some of the little trimmy stuff around the roof of the dollhouse. So stay tuned and see how this all comes together. All right, we've got the dollhouse upside down on the work table today. I'm gonna start out by, and I won't do this part on camera, I'm gonna paint the underside of all of my eaves. The underside of the porch roof, the underside of the eaves on the side, the underside of the dormer eaves. I'm gonna paint all of that with our white trim color, and then I'll come back and we'll start putting on rafters and braces and all kinds of stuff. Really hoping you can see what I'm doing here. So we need to mark to put the little rafter ends in. And we need to do that. There's a set in place here that they're going to butt up against. This piece is, I think I remember it being 24 3/16 of an inch. That's important because what we are going to do is we're going to line up our ruler with that inset part. And we're going to mark, making sure that's level. My ruler is 24 inches long, so this works perfectly. We're going to mark every 1.5 inches going this way. 4.5, 6, 7.5. I'm gonna have to stand up. 7.5, 9. Just have to keep my brain going so I get the right numbers. 1/2, 12. 13.5. 15, 16.5, 18. And once the house is turned over, don't worry about these being really neat because it's going to be covered up once the house turns right side up. All right, now I'm to the end. So now I'm going to flip my ruler around so the one is on this end, and I'm going to line up with this end of that little post. And I'm again going to mark every 1.5 inches. That will put these marks just short of the ones we just did, about 3/16 of an inch, which is the width of our little rafters. So I'm going to finish marking this way, get the rafters out, and we'll start gluing them in. I'll be right back. All right, so I've got myself all set up. I've got my tray with all our pieces we painted last week. I've got a lid with some glue on it. I've got a skewer to put the glue onto it with. And I am going to start putting these in place. I'm going to try them out first. In fact, I think I'll turn the camera off. I did take a picture of the markings. I will put a picture of that on the blog post. I think I might want to set these out just to make sure they look right before I start gluing. Probably a really good idea. So those lines do make it really easy. To get them in there, to know where to put them. So I'm going to fiddle around, I'm going to lay them all out, make sure they're all going to fit, make sure they're all looking like they're evenly spaced, and then I'll come back and show you how it looks. All right, I've got them all in there. Make sure that you're putting them all the same direction so that the ends are angled correctly when you go to put them in. And then it's just a matter of, I'm going to take them out one at a time. I'm going to put glue on this bottom edge. Whoops, my hands are still cold. I was outside earlier. Put some glue here. You don't need to cut the whole clean edge, just part of it, just, you know, majority of it. Slide it in place, make sure it's lined up with your marks and that it's straight, and just let it go. So I'll do a couple of them on camera, and then I'm going to turn the camera off and just start gluing these in. And when they're all glued in, I'll come back and show you how it looks. Okay, these are all in and pretty straight. I'm happy with how they look. Now we're going to put this little trim piece. Remember we left this slot clear? So I'm going to put some glue in. Some glue on these raw edges, and that just slides in there. Now you might need to take some sandpaper or something similar to your spaces. Dry fit your arch in before, always dry fit before you glue anything, but especially these. And then make sure that it's running straight, that it's sitting completely straight with everything. If it doesn't meet in a spot, in a small spot, that can always be filled with filler. I am going to go, once this glue dries, I'm going to give this whole unit here another coat of white paint, just to be sure that I didn't miss any spots on these rafters, and to cover up any pencil marks that are still showing, any glue that shows, anything like that. But that just needs to dry, and then I'll paint it later, and we'll look at it after it's painted. But let's move on to the next step. All right, before we go on, I just wanted to show you how this looks. I love how it looks. I think I've got a couple that got knocked crooked after I checked them the last time, but that's fine. They'll be fine. I've painted them with another coat of paint, so I've covered all the glue, all the pencil lines, and that part is finished. So now I'm going to turn the dollhouse around, and we're going to work on the end. All right, now you'll probably notice that there's trim on the corners. I thought I was filming that. I did what every YouTuber does at some point in their YouTube. I thought I had pushed record, and I had not. And it wasn't until I went to look at the footage that I realized I didn't have any. So I glued the trim on that we had put together, or that we had cut a week or two ago. I don't remember exactly when we cut it. And on the front, I added an 1/8 inch strip, and I'll have a photo of that in the blog post. I just did not like the way that this looked with just the board on the side. I wanted something to wrap around, and I would have rather have wrapped more around, but the porch railing was in the way, and I didn't want to have it end at the porch railing, so I went with a narrow strip. But I like it a lot better, and like I said, there will be photos. So now we are going to put these guys in. So the first two are pretty easy. The first one lines up right here. And by the way, I've already done the other end of the house off camera, so you didn't have to watch me struggle with trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. Yeah, this is the right one. And yeah, these ones. I'm just double checking that. Let's see, and I need glue on this bevel. Now on my other end, I did have to sand a couple of these. I found that they didn't fit quite the way I wanted them to. The first two are easy. The first one in the front goes up here, and the rest of them go on the back roof. And the first one on the back, can you see that? Yeah, it goes right here. I do have some paint on the edge. Now I have switched to tacky glue for these. For a couple of, main reason is I don't want to have to touch up paint if the glue oozes out. With the wood glue, although the wood glue glues much better in my opinion, if it oozes out, it leaves a yellow splotch, and I really don't want to have to go back and touch up in that close of an area. I already had to touch up along here, so I don't want, and that was with tape. I taped this to paint this, and I still had to do some touch up. So I didn't want to have to touch up the paint on this area where these come up against the wood siding. Now you want to make sure that these are snug against your front and back siding, trims rather, and we're going to let these dry because we need to use these to find our placement for these three, because they're going to be spaced out on here in a specific place. But that might vary on your dollhouse and on my dollhouse, just because things are together slightly differently. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to like triple check that I've got footage here, and then when this glue dries, I'll come back and we'll put the other three on. All right, now the fun begins. We need to make the one here even with this one. And here's how I figured out how to do it. I have this ruler that has a square grid system on it. And what I did was I lined up the bottom with this, and then I lined up so that I was straight with my trim, making sure that I was also straight with my siding. And I used a clamp to clamp this in place. Now that's held there. So now I can figure out where this goes. This is going to fit with the, so that it fits right with that. And then it needs to be square with the siding. So I can put my glue on the two areas that need to be glued. And I find it is best to, after we get this one put in place, make sure that's where it belongs. Take this down and make sure that it is sitting straight. Make sure that this is this edge is parallel to this edge. And now I'm going to let this one sit up too, because we need to use this piece and this one up here to determine where these two go, which, believe me, it took me a few minutes of scratching my head on the other end of the house saying, how am I going to figure this out? But I got it figured out. Now also, you will find, if you laid yours down on parchment paper like I did to paint them, you will need to run a little bit of sandpaper on that area because there will be some paint sticking out. So I'm going to let this let this glue dry. And when this glue is dried, I'll come back and we'll put in these two. And then we can move on to putting the dormer pieces on. All right, hopefully the lighting is all right here. Now this is already set up and they are staying straight. So now we need to place these two, and we want them to be equal distance from each other. So I'm going to do what I did on the other end, and we are going to hope that it works. But measure, measure, measure several times, and then put your things in, then glue. So what I did was I started out by going about where I thought it was going to be. This allows me to kind of play around with, these are those little clamps that I got at Dollar Tree, and they will hold these. That way these have something to sit against. So measuring from the center of there to the corner of that one is 3 inches. Center of that one, that's 3 1/4, and that's 3 1/2. So everything needs to move up. That's at 3 1/4. Now I went up too high, I think. Where's this one at? I think I'm pretty close. That one's 3 1/4. Yes. All right, and they look good in that position, so that's where I'm going to glue them. What I did was I measured from the center of this to the corner of the next one on each of those. And when I got the same measurement, I figured they've got to be pretty close to the same distance apart. That's just how I figured out to do it. You might figure out a better way, and if you do, let me know. And now we need to put these on so that this part of it is parallel with the siding. And I've noticed that they are not sitting, mine are not all sitting exactly flat on here. So I'm going to have to use some, excuse me, use some filler and kind of hide that little crack. But I'd rather do that. Like this one, there's a gap. I'd rather fill that gap than have this going sideways. And it looks like it is straight, so, because it looks like what I'm going by is this surface is fairly level with these lines. So I'm going to get this So get that, and then measure again before your glue sets up. So needs to go just the tiniest bit down there. All right, now I'm going to let that sit, and then we'll turn the house around. I want this glue to firm up a bit before I start moving the house, because I'm going to have to rotate the house so we can work on the dormer in the light, because I've only got light coming in the window today. So we'll let the glue dry, and then I'll be back. All right, hopefully it is light enough here. We are going to, I did a little touch up on my paint, and I taped my window in place because we need to have the window in place to place our dormer brackets. But before we can put the brackets in, we need to put this trim on. We cut this a while back, and since you missed me putting the trim on the corners of the house, I thought I would make sure that you got to see this. So, and it's just a matter of doing just simple glue. I'm using tacky glue on this trim, mainly because if any glue oozes out on here, it won't show. And this is not an area that I want to have to do any touch-ups really close to those window trims. And I'm finding I'm not having to tape these. They are sticking in very nicely. So let me get, and there's a little blob of paint there. So I've got sandpaper on my table. I'm just running those edges against the sandpaper to get any little bits off. Okay, this one is just a hair too long. It could be because there's a little more paint now. There, that's all it took, was just a couple of swipes across the sandpaper. A little more glue, and then we have our straight pieces to go on the side. Now make sure that this is all lined up. Just a little bit. And now we've got these pieces which are going to go here, and I am going to do a little sanding. I'm just going to sand this until I get it to fit. I'm going to have to do that off camera because I need to be right where the camera is. I'm just going to angle this end so it'll fit around the roof. And when this is glued on and the glue is dry, I'll come back and we'll put on these brackets. All right, my trim has dried enough that I can glue against it. So our first two are easy. They are going to glue right up there against that trim. That's the easy positions. Now, I don't know if I talked to you about this. I have taped the roof in. Now, the directions tell me to glue the window in. I'm not gluing the window in until after I do the interior because I don't want to lose this access to these front areas. I want to be able to have this window out and be able to reach in to do anything I need to do as far as wiring, as far as decorating, because I don't like to do that until the house is in this form. I know a lot of people will go in and start pre-wiring and pre-papering their walls before they put their house together. But I don't do that because I want my wallpaper to go around the corners. I want my wiring to make good sharp corners. I don't want to have to. I'd rather reach into the house to do my wiring. So hopefully that made sense. So we are going to glue these guys in. And now the reason why you need your window here is we are going to center these two pieces centered underneath this section of our window. And I'm debating whether I want to eyeball this or if I want to actually measure. That looks, let me see how it looks. And again, I am sanding off the edges of any paint that's kind of sticking out. So let me see how that looks. I think I need to pause you and go get my ruler so I can just double check that this is right. All right, now I've got my ruler, so I am going to, let's see, this is inch. Let's see how far that is from there. That is 2.5 inches from there. How about this guy? Let's center him there and then see. That appears to be where I want them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these clips, these clamps. These give me something to set that against. That way I can kind of mark where I want this to be. I'm going to double check my positioning. And I think equally having this, you know, an equal distance from these is also important. Let's see. Okay, everything looks a little bit more up. Just, okay, that's now not the same height, so that's not right. Let's try that. This is what I'm doing. Okay, that's about as even as I'm going to get these. So I'm going to go ahead and get the glue on these and put them in. Now I have been working on the trim around the sides of the roof. And I've decided I'm only going to show you how to do it here because I had to do a lot of hair pulling and a lot of changing up from what the way the directions read. If I would have done my molding, my trim around the roof on the sides of the house the way it said, it wouldn't have matched. So I'm going to show you what I did. I've kind of streamlined the process after fighting with it for the last hour or so. So when this is dry, then we'll put the rafter ends in on the sides, and then I'll show you how to put the trim on. And this trim will go the same on the sides of the dollhouse as it does here. It's just this is a little smaller and only a few measurements to make. So let's let this glue dry, and then I'll be back again. All right, so this is dry now, but we're not going to go any further this week because I had some issues come up, not mini related, and I had to deal with those, and now I really just don't have the time to film the next step and get a good quality video to you in time on Sunday. So I'm going to call it quits for here. Next week we'll come back, we'll put the rafter ends onto this dormer, we'll put the trim around the dormer roof, and I'm not sure what else. You'll have to come back and see what else we do. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would love it if you'd push that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when I put up a new video. If you have friends that do minis, pass the channel on to them. They might enjoy it too. And above all else, just thank you from the bottom of my heart for sticking with me and watching this video. And I will talk to you next time. Bye.